I signed everything they demanded. The house, the business, the entire legacy my late wife Jennifer left behind. Her daughters Brittany and Courtney smiled as the ink dried on the paper, believing they had just stripped a senile old man of his last dime. They looked at my worn flannel shirt and my calloused hands and saw a victim. But their smiles vanished the second their high-priced lawyer turned pale, dropped the contract onto the mahogany table and whispered, "Oh my God, what have you done?" They thought they were inheriting a fortune. They did not know they were inheriting a debt that would bury them alive. My name is Wallace King, and this is how I taught my stepdaughters that greed is a fatal poison. Before I continue this story of financial ruin and justice, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand your ground against family members who mistook your kindness for weakness. The rain in Seattle does not wash away grief. It only makes the mud deeper. The gray sky over the evergreen Washelli Memorial Park seemed to weep for Jennifer, but her daughters stood under their black umbrellas with dry eyes and impatient postures. The moment the casket was lowered into the wet earth, the air changed. The priest had barely finished his final amen when Brittany, the eldest, at 32, stepped toward me. She did not offer a hug. She did not offer a hand. She threw a heavy, waterlogged black garbage bag at my feet. It landed with a wet thud in the mud, splashing my dress shoes. "Here are your clothes, Wallace." Brittany's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. "Do not go back to the house. We had the locks changed an hour ago. Hand over the keys to the truck and the gate remote. Now." I stood there, the rain dripping from the brim of my hat, looking at the woman my wife had raised. I had spent 3 years trying to be a father figure to them. I had fixed their cars. I had paid for their vacations quietly. I had listened to their complaints about their boyfriends. I thought grief might unite us. I was wrong. Courtney, the younger one at 29, stepped up beside her sister. She was wearing the pearl necklace I had bought for Jennifer on our first anniversary. It looked wrong on her neck. It looked like stolen property. "Stop staring!" Wallace, Courtney sneered, checking her phone as if she had a brunch reservation to get to. "Mom is dead. The show is over. You were just a husband for 3 years, a blip on the radar. That house belonged to our mother, which means it belongs to us. You have no legal standing. You have no blood right. You are just a squatter we are finally evicting." I looked down at the garbage bag. My life was apparently inside it. My shaving kit. My few suits. The photo album of Jennifer and me in Hawaii. They had packed me up like trash while I was at the funeral home saying goodbye to their mother. "Are you sure you want to walk this path, Brittany?" I asked. My voice was low. I did not shout. I never shout. Shouting is for men who have no control. Brittany laughed. It was a harsh, ugly sound that startled a crow in a nearby tree. "Path, there is no path for you, old man. Get in your rusted truck and drive until you run out of gas. If you try to come back to the property, we will call the cops for trespassing." She held out her hand for the keys. I did not argue. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the house key. I dropped it into her palm. She curled her fingers around it like a child snatching a piece of candy. "Goodbye, Wallace," she said, turning her back on me to walk toward her brand-new Mercedes. I picked up the garbage bag. It was heavy with the rain. I walked past the grave of the woman I loved, past the flowers that were already wilting in the storm, and climbed into my 2010 Ford pickup. The engine roared to life with a rattle I had been meaning to fix. As I pulled out of the cemetery gates, I watched in the rearview mirror as my stepdaughters high-fived each other over their mother's fresh grave. They were celebrating. They thought they had won. I reached for my burner phone in the glove compartment. I dialed a number I had not called in 4 years. It rang once. "Leonard," I said. "Wallace." The voice on the other end was raspy, the voice of a man who smoked too many cigars and won too many lawsuits. "I thought you retired. I thought you were planting hydrangeas." "I was. I replied, watching the rain blur the windshield. But the weather has changed. Activate the Omega Protocol. We are going to liquidation. Leonard paused. I could hear the smile in his voice when he answered. Understood. I will prepare the paperwork. It is going to be a bloodbath, Wallace. I hung up and drove. I did not have a home to go to, so I drove to the only place that felt appropriate for a man starting a war. The Starlight Motel on the outskirts of the city. It was a place where the neon sign buzzed incessantly, and the carpet smelled of stale smoke and despair. It was perfect. It was the kind of place where nobody looked twice at an old man with a garbage bag. I checked into room 112. I threw the bag of wet clothes into the corner and sat on the lumpy mattress. I opened my old battered laptop. It took a moment to boot up the fan whirring loudly in the silence of the room. When the screen lit up, I did not open a solitaire game. I opened a secure server that required a two-factor authentication code and a biometric scan. The screen filled with complex spreadsheets, flowcharts, and financial diagrams. To the untrained eye, it looked like chaos. To me, it looked like a map. My stepdaughters saw a 73-year-old man who liked to garden and drove a truck worth less than their handbags. They saw Wallace King, the retiree. They did not know Wallace King, the corporate liquidator. For 40 years, I was the man Wall Street called when a company needed to be gutted. I did not build businesses. I dissected them. I found the rot, I cut it out, and I sold the pieces. I understood debt structures, lean priorities, and personal guarantees better than I understood my own emotions. When I met Jennifer 4 years ago, I was tired of the game. I wanted peace. I fell in love with her kindness, her laugh, her inability to see the bad in anyone. But Jennifer had a secret too. She was a brilliant designer, but a terrible businesswoman. I pulled up the file labeled Jennifer's Decor LLC. Brittany and Courtney saw the flagship store downtown. They saw the glossy magazine covers featuring their mother. They saw the invoices for high-end Italian leather and French silk. They saw revenue. They never looked at the liabilities. The truth was on my screen in red ink. Jennifer's business had been technically bankrupt 4 years ago. She was drowning in vendor debt. She had taken out predatory loans to keep up appearances for her daughters, funding their college tuitions and their luxury cars while her business bled cash. When we married, I did not tell her to close it down. It was her dream. Instead, I quietly stepped in. I used my own capital to stabilize the company, but I did not just give her the money. I was a liquidator, not a philanthropist. I structured the capital infusion as secured debt. I bought the promissory notes from her creditors. I personally guaranteed the commercial mortgages. I looked at the diagram on my screen. The house they had just kicked me out of was not owned free and clear. It was collateralized against the business loans. The business itself was operating only because I paid the vendors from my private accounts every month. Brittany and Courtney saw a mansion and a thriving company. I saw a house of cards, and I was the only hand holding it up. My phone buzzed. It was a text message from Brittany. I looked at the screen. The message read, "Do not think about hiring a lawyer to fight for the estate. If you try to claim a single dollar, Courtney and I will go to the police. We will tell them you were abusive to Mom in her final months. We will tell everyone you manipulated her while she was on medication. We have friends in the press. Go away, Wallace, or we will destroy your reputation." I stared at the glowing pixels. A cold calm settled over me. This was the mistake. This was the line. Greed I could understand. Grief makes people do selfish things. But this threat, this was malice. They were willing to tarnish the memory of their mother's final peaceful months just to secure a paycheck. They were willing to frame me for a crime I would never commit. I had spent every night by Jennifer's bedside. I had fed her ice chips when she could not swallow. I had read to her until my voice gave out. and they wanted to weaponize that I typed a reply to Leonard on my secure line. They just threatened blackmail. Take the gloves off. No mercy. I closed the laptop. I stood up and went to the window looking out at the rain-slicked parking lot of the motel. I could see my reflection in the glass. I looked old. I looked tired. But my eyes were sharp. They wanted the house. They wanted the business. They wanted the legacy. I would give it to them. I would give them everything they asked for, and then I would watch as the weight of it crushed them. The next morning, the rain had stopped, but the air was heavy with humidity. I sat at the small round table in the motel room, eating a stale bagel I had bought from the vending machine. I checked my bank app. The joint account I shared with Jennifer, the one we used for groceries and utility bills, was locked. Access denied. I called the bank. The teller sounded nervous. I am sorry, Mr. King. We received a notarized directive this morning from Brittany Davis, acting as the executor of the estate. She presented a power of attorney document dated 3 days before your wife passed. The account has been drained and closed. Drained. There was $50,000 in that account. Jennifer wanted it kept liquid for emergencies. Brittany had taken it all. A power of attorney signed 3 days before death. Jennifer was in a morphine-induced haze 3 days before she died. She did not know what day of the week it was, let alone what she was signing. They had forced her hand. They had guided a dying woman's pen to steal cash before her body was even cold. Thank you, I said to the teller. I understand. I hung up. I did not fight it. Fighting it would alert them. I needed them to feel powerful. I needed them to feel invincible. An hour later, a process server knocked on the motel door. He looked surprised to find me in such a dump. He handed me a thick envelope. You have been served, Mr. King. I opened the packet. It was a court order from a lawyer named Mr. Pendergast. I knew Pendergast by reputation. He was a shark in a cheap suit, a man who made his money bullying widows and confusing juries. The document was a motion to remove me from any managerial role at Jennifer's Decor, citing incompetence and mismanagement. They were moving fast. They wanted to cut me out of the business before I could look at the books. They did not realize I had written the books. I sat down at the laptop again. I opened my email and composed a message to the head of accounting at the furniture company. Her name was Sarah, and she was the only person in the office who knew who I really was. Subject: immediate cessation of payments. Body: Sarah, effective immediately, stop all automatic transfers from the WK Holdings account to the vendor supply chains. Cancel the scheduled interest payments to the commercial lenders. If the suppliers call asking for payment, direct them to the new management. Do not offer explanations. Just stop the flow. I hit send. That email was the equivalent of cutting the brake lines on a speeding car. For 3 years, my money had covered the gap between Jennifer's spending and her earning. Without my monthly injection of capital, the business would be insolvent in weeks. But Brittany and Courtney did not know that. They only looked at the sales figures. They did not look at the margins. My phone rang. It was Brittany. We know you are at the motel, she said. Her voice was dripping with triumph. Mr. Pendergast says you accepted the court papers. Good. We want to meet. Tonight. At the house. At the house, I asked. Yes. We are going to settle this. Pendergast has drawn up a separation of assets agreement. You sign over your rights to the estate, the business, and the house. In exchange, we will agree not to press charges for the elder abuse. We will let you walk away with your truck and your personal effects. It is a generous offer, Wallace. Take it. I let a long silence hang on the line. I made my voice tremble when I answered. I just want this to be over, Brittany. I don't want to fight you. Good, she said. Be here at 7, and wear something decent. We have guests coming later to celebrate Mom's life, and we don't want you looking like a hobo. I hung up and looked at my reflection. I shaved my face clean. I put on my one good suit, the one I had saved from the garbage bag. It was damp and wrinkled, but it was a bespoke Italian suit I had bought in Milan 10 years ago. It cost more than Brittany's car, but to her it would just look like an old man's church clothes. I drove to the house. My house. The house where I had held Jennifer's hand as she took her last breath. The gate code had been changed, but the gate was left open for me. I parked the truck next to Brittany's Mercedes and Courtney's Porsche. The house was lit up like a Christmas tree. I could see movement inside. I walked to the front door. I did not have to knock. Courtney opened it, holding a glass of champagne. "You're late," she said, stepping aside. The living room was a mess. They had already started redecorating. Jennifer's favorite floral curtains were pulled down, piled in a corner. The antique vase we bought in Paris was gone, replaced by a modern, ugly sculpture. The safe in the study was open and empty. Mr. Pendergast was sitting at the dining room table. He was a sweaty man, with a comb-over and a tie that was too wide. He didn't stand up when I entered. "Sit down," Mr. King Pendergast said, tapping a stack of papers. "Let's make this quick. My clients have been very patient." Brittany walked in from the kitchen. She was eating an apple, chewing loudly. "Sign the papers, Wallace. Then you can go back to your motel and rot." I sat down. I looked at the document. It was titled Voluntary Relinquishment of Estate Rights. It was a legal surrender. It stated that I, Wallace King, knowingly and voluntarily, gave up all claims to the property, the business entities known as Jennifer's Decor, and all future earnings derived from the estate. In exchange, the document stated that the estate would not pursue civil or criminal litigation regarding the treatment of the deceased. It was blackmail on paper. It was disgusting. And it was exactly what I wanted. I looked at Courtney. She was wearing the pearl necklace again, twisting it around her finger. "That was your mother's favorite," I said softly. "It looks better on me," Courtney replied. She was too old for pearls. They made her look washed out. I gripped the pen. My hand shook, not from age, but from the effort of holding back my fury. "If I sign this," I asked, looking at Brittany, "do you promise to leave me alone? Do you promise to never contact me again?" Brittany smirked. "Cross my heart. Just sign the damn paper and vanish, Wallace. We don't want you. We never did." I lowered the pen to the paper. I hesitated. I looked at Pendergast. Is there any liability I should know about?" I asked, playing the confused senior. Pendergast rolled his eyes. "No, Mr. King. You are signing away assets. You are giving up rights. You are walking away clean. It is a gift. Sign it before they change their minds." He was a terrible lawyer. He hadn't done his due diligence. He hadn't run a credit check on the business. He assumed that because the business had cash flow, it had value. He assumed the house was an asset, not a liability. I leaned forward. "I would like to add one small handwritten addendum," I said, "just for my peace of mind." Brittany groaned. "Oh my God. What now?" "Just a sentence," I said. "I wanted to say, the beneficiaries, Brittany Davis and Courtney Davis, agree to accept all assets as is, including all current accounts holdings and existing operational structures, effectively immediately releasing Wallace King from all associated ties." Pendergast read the sentence I wrote on the notepad. He laughed. "That is standard language, Mr. King. It basically means you are firing yourself. It means you can't come back next week and claim you are still the manager." "Fine. Add it. Let's get this over with." He did not know what existing operational structures meant in my world. He thought it meant the keys to the office. I knew it meant the debt covenants. I wrote the sentence in the margins. I initialed it. And then, with a heavy heart but a clear conscience, I signed the document. Wallace King. Brittany snatched the paper away before the ink was dry. Done, she shouted. Finally. Get out, Wallace. Take your truck and go. Courtney raised her champagne glass. To us, to the new owners of the empire, I stood up. I adjusted my jacket. I looked at the two women who had tormented my wife in her final days with their demands for money, who had treated me like a servant, who had threatened to destroy my name. You have the house, I said quietly. You have the business. Good luck. I walked out the door. The cool night air hit my face. I walked to my truck, climbed in, and drove away. I did not look back. I drove straight to the luxury hotel downtown, the Four Seasons. I walked to the front desk. Mr. King. The concierge beamed. It has been a long time. We have the presidential suite ready for you, as per your call earlier. I handed him my black Amex card. Thank you, James. And James, I'm expecting a guest tomorrow morning. A Mr. Leonard Katz. Please send him up immediately. I slept like a baby that night. I slept in Egyptian cotton sheets, knowing that across town, Brittany and Courtney were likely throwing a party in a house that was technically already in foreclosure, spending money from a business that was currently hemorrhaging cash at a rate of $10,000 an hour. The next morning, Leonard arrived at 10 sharp. He was wearing a sharp gray suit and carrying a briefcase that looked like it contained nuclear codes. He sat on the sofa in my suite and poured himself a cup of coffee. They filed the papers this morning, Leonard said, grinning. It is official. They are the sole owners of Jennifer's Decor and the estate. Pendergast rushed the filing to make sure you couldn't rescind. Excellent, I said. Did you bring the reading I did? Leonard pulled out a document. It wasn't a will. It was the transfer of asset responsibility based on the contract I had signed the night before. I checked my watch. It was 10:15 a.m. Right about now, I said, Brittany is walking into the main office of the furniture store. She is probably sitting in Jennifer's chair, putting her feet up on the desk. Leonard nodded. And right about now, the accounts payable manager is walking in to tell her that the morning shipment of leather from Italy is being held at the dock because the wire transfer bounced. I picked up my phone. I opened the banking app. I navigated to the section for personal guarantees. I saw the loans. $4.2 million in commercial debt. $200,000 in revolving credit lines. All of it secured by my signature. I pressed the button that said, Withdraw personal guarantee due to change of ownership. It was a clause I had written into every single loan document. If the business ever changed hands without my written consent to continue the guarantee, the debt would immediately accelerate. It meant the full amount was due. Not next year. Now. I pressed confirm. Leonard watched me. It's done, he asked. It's done, I said. The shield is down. At that exact moment, 5 miles away, Brittany's phone likely started ringing. Then Courtney's, then Pendergast's. The first domino had fallen. But I wasn't done. I wanted to see the look on their faces when they realized the gravity of their mistake. Leonard, I said, standing up, let's go to their lawyer's office. They scheduled a reading of the will at noon to rub my nose in it. I think we should attend. We arrived at Pendergast's office at 11:55 a.m. Brittany and Courtney were already there, popping another bottle of champagne. They looked like they had won the lottery. When I walked in, flanked by Leonard, their laughter died. What is he doing here? Brittany demanded. We told you to get lost, Wallace. You signed the papers. You have nothing. Pendergast looked at Leonard. He recognized him. I saw the color drain from Pendergast's face. He knew who Leonard Katz was. Leonard was the lawyer you hired when you wanted to destroy a Fortune 500 company. Mr. Katz, Pendergast stammered. To what do we owe the pleasure? We are here to clarify the terms of the transfer, Leonard said smoothly, placing his briefcase on the table. There is nothing to clarify, Courtney shouted. We own it all. Leonard opened the briefcase. He pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was the credit agreement for the business. "Yes, you do own it all," Leonard said. "And because you insisted on the immediate transfer of all operational structures as per Mr. King's handwritten addendum, which you countersigned, you have triggered the acceleration clause." He slid the paper across the table. "What does that mean?" Brittany asked, her voice wavering. Leonard smiled. It was a shark's smile. "It means, Ms. Davis, that by taking ownership of the business and the house, you have also assumed the liabilities that Mr. King was personally covering. As of 10:15 this morning, Mr. King withdrew his backing. The banks have called the loans." "Loans?" Brittany laughed nervously. "Mom was rich. There were no loans. Your mother was insolvent," I said, speaking for the first time. "I kept the business alive with my own money. $4.2 million of debt, to be exact." The room went silent. "4 million," Courtney whispered. "And since you are now the sole owners," Leonard continued, "and since you signed a document accepting all existing obligations to get Mr. King out of the picture, you are now personally liable for that debt. You have 48 hours to pay the bank $4.2 million, or they will seize the business, the house, and any personal assets you have to cover the difference." Pendergast grabbed the paper. His hands were shaking. He read the clause. He looked at me. He looked at the addendum I had written the night before. You set us up," Pendergast whispered. "I did not," I replied coldly. "I offered to stay. I offered to help. You demanded I leave. You demanded everything. I just gave you what you wanted." Brittany stood up. Her face was red. "You are lying. This is a trick. I have money. I have the house. You have a mortgage that is in default as of this morning," I said. "And since you threatened to go to the police with false accusations, I suggest you save your energy for your defense attorney. Because I am suing you for defamation, conspiracy, and emotional distress. And I have a lot more money than you do to fight it." I stood up. I buttoned my Italian suit. "Enjoy the legacy, girls. It is all yours." I walked out of the office, leaving them screaming in the wake of their own destruction. But the real show was just beginning. The morning sun that filtered through the thin, stained curtains of the Starlight Motel did not bring warmth. It brought a notification on my phone that hit me harder than the eviction. I sat on the edge of the lumpy mattress, my back stiff from the cheap springs, and stared at the banking app open on my screen. The joint checking account, the one Jennifer and I had used for 3 years to manage the household expenses, the one that held $50,000 intended for her medical bills and emergency contingencies, read 0. It was not just empty. It was overdrawn. I tapped the transaction history with a thumb that remained steady despite the rage boiling in my gut. The withdrawal had happened at 9:01 in the morning, the second the bank doors opened. A counter withdrawal. Cash. I dialed the bank immediately. The voice on the other end was cheerful, a young teller who had no idea she was speaking to a man who used to liquidate assets for a living. I asked who authorized the transaction. "It was a legal withdrawal, Mr. King," she chirped. "Miss Brittany Davis presented a durable power of attorney signed by your late wife. We have a copy on file. It grants her full access to all joint and individual accounts." I asked for the date on the document. "Let me see," she said, humming as she typed. "Here it is. It was signed and notarized 4 days ago." 4 days ago. I hung up the phone without saying another word. 4 days ago, Jennifer was in a medically induced coma. The hospice nurses were administering high doses of morphine every 4 hours to manage her pain. She could not lift a spoon to feed herself, let alone hold a pen to sign away her life savings. They had forged it. Or worse, they had guided a dying woman's limp hand across a piece of paper while she was unconscious with a notary they had likely bribed or tricked standing witness. This was not just greed. This was a felony. They had stolen $50,000, but the money was irrelevant to me. What mattered was the disrespect. They had violated the sanctity of their mother's final hours to secure a payday. I stood up and paced the small room. The carpet smelled of stale cigarettes and regret. Brittany and Courtney were not just spoiled children. They were predators. And like all predators who have never been hunted, they were careless. A heavy knock on the motel door interrupted my thoughts. I checked the peephole. It was a man in a windbreaker holding a thick manila envelope. A process server. I opened the door. "Wallace King," he asked, looking at my wrinkled shirt with a sneer. I took the envelope. He turned and walked away before I could even close the door. I sat back down at the wobbly table and ripped open the package. It was a court order drafted by Mr. Pendergast, the family lawyer Brittany had hired. I scanned the legalese. It was a masterpiece of arrogance. Emergency motion for removal of director. The document claimed that I, Wallace King, had demonstrated gross negligence and incompetence in the management of Jennifer's Decor LLC. It cited falling revenue, lack of modernization, and failure to secure new vendor contracts. It demanded my immediate resignation from all operational roles and barred me from entering the corporate offices or contacting employees. They were firing me. They were kicking me out of the company I had secretly saved from bankruptcy. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound that echoed off the peeling wallpaper. They accused me of incompetence. They looked at the balance sheets and saw red, assuming it was my fault. They did not understand that the only reason the company existed was because I was personally covering the bleeding. They wanted me gone so they could take the reins of a carriage that was already careening off a cliff. They thought this court order was a sword. They did not realize they were cutting their own parachute. I did not call a lawyer to contest the motion. I did not file a countersuit. I did not scream. I opened my laptop and logged into my secure email server. I found the contact for Sarah, the head accountant at Jennifer's Decor. Sarah was a sharp woman, a single mother who worked hard and kept her head down. She was the only person in the entire company who knew the truth about the finances, because she was the one who processed my personal checks every month to pay the Italian leather suppliers and the shipping logistics firms. I typed the subject line Directive Omega. "Sarah," I wrote, "you will likely receive a court order today removing me from the company. Do not fight it. Cooperate with Brittany and Courtney fully. Give them the passwords. Give them the keys. However effective immediately you are to cease all automatic transfers from my private holding company King Capital to the vendor accounts. Cancel the standing orders for the warehouse lease payments. Stop the interest payments on the commercial line of credit that I personally guaranteed." I paused, my fingers hovering over the keys. I added one last line. "If the suppliers call asking why the checks have stopped, direct them to the new management. Do not offer explanations. Just tell them Mr. King is no longer the payer." I hit send. I sat back and watched the screen. That email was the death knell of Jennifer's Decor. For 3 years, I had injected $12,000 a month into the business to keep the lights on and the inventory moving. I paid for the high-end marketing campaigns that Brittany loved to brag about on Instagram. I paid for the first-class flights Courtney took to buy her shows in Paris. By sending that email, I had just turned off the oxygen. The fallout would not be immediate. It would take a few days. The checks I had sent last week would clear. The lights would stay on for a little while longer. But the next billing cycle was in 48 hours. The warehouse lease was due on the 1st of the month. The Italian suppliers who demanded payment up front because of Jennifer's past credit history would stop shipping the moment the wire transfer failed. Brittany and Courtney believed they had just seized an empire. In reality, they had just locked themselves inside a burning building and thrown away the key. I checked my watch. It was nearing noon. My stomach growled, reminding me that I hadn't eaten a real meal since the funeral. I put on my jacket and walked out of the motel room. The air was thick with the threat of rain typical for Seattle. I walked to a diner down the street. I ordered coffee and eggs. As I ate, I thought about the $50,000 they had stolen from the joint account. They would likely spend it quickly. A deposit on a new car. A shopping spree to celebrate their victory. They would burn through it before they realized that the $50,000 was the only real cash the estate had left. My phone buzzed again. It was a notification from the security system at the main house. I still had access to the app on my phone. They hadn't thought to change the digital master codes yet. I watched the live feed. Brittany was walking through the living room with an appraiser. She was pointing at the furniture, at the art on the walls. She was already liquidating the assets. "Sell it all," I heard her say through the tiny microphone in the camera. "We want to remodel. Get rid of his old chair. Get rid of those dusty books. We want everything modern." She was selling the chair I sat in to read to her mother. She was selling the books Jennifer had collected for 30 years. I closed the app. Pain flared in my chest, hot and sharp. That chair was where Jennifer and I had planned our trip to Italy. That library was her sanctuary. They were erasing us. But anger is a useless emotion if it isn't channeled. I took a sip of the bitter diner coffee. Let them sell the furniture. Let them strip the house to the studs. The house was leveraged to the hilt. The mortgage I held on the property had a cross-default clause. If the business defaulted on its payments, the house would be called as collateral. By firing me, they had triggered the business default. By selling the furniture, they were just rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. I finished my meal and paid with cash. I walked back to the motel, my steps slow and deliberate. I was not a man in a hurry. The trap was set. The bait was taken. Now all I had to do was wait for the snap. When I got back to the room, there was a voicemail from Pendergast. "Mr. King," the voice said, oozing with condescension, "we trust you have received the court order. Do not attempt to enter the premises of Jennifer's decor. If you are seen on the property, security will be called. We are conducting a forensic audit of the books to determine the extent of your mismanagement. We expect you to cooperate." A forensic audit. I almost laughed out loud. Pendergast was going to look at the books and find nothing. He would find zero revenue to support the expenses. He would find a black hole where the money should be. He would look for the embezzlement he was so sure I committed, and instead he would find the millions of dollars of my own money I had poured into the company to keep it afloat. He was going to audit himself into a heart attack. I sat down on the bed and waited. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the stained carpet. I was alone, without a home, without a wife, and without a family. But I was not powerless. Tomorrow, the rent for the showroom downtown would be due. Tomorrow, the automatic payment from my account would not arrive. Tomorrow, the landlord, a man named Mr. Henderson, who had no patience for late payments, would make a phone call. And when Brittany answered that phone thinking she was the queen of the world, she would hear the first crack of thunder in the storm I had summoned. I lay down on the bed, staring at the ceiling fan spinning lazily above me. I closed my eyes and whispered a promise to the memory of my wife. I tried to save them, Jen. I tried to protect them from themselves. But they chose this. They chose the money over the man. Now let them see what the money really costs. The drive back to the house felt like a funeral procession of one. My old Ford pickup rattled over the cobblestones of the driveway, the headlights cutting through the evening mist to reveal the home I had shared with Jennifer. It was a beautiful structure, a sprawling colonial estate that I had quietly refinanced 3 times to keep the roof from leaking and the foundation from cracking. To Brittany and Courtney, it was a palace. To me, it was a line item on a balance sheet that was bleeding red ink. I parked behind Brittany's Mercedes. The house was blazing with light, every window glowing, as if they were hosting a gala. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked tired. My eyes were rimmed with red, my shoulders slumped in my cheap jacket. It was the perfect costume. I needed to look like a beaten dog, ready to roll over. I walked to the front door. I did not have a key anymore, so I knocked. The sound echoed hollow and heavy. Courtney opened the door. She was holding a glass of wine, her face flushed with the kind of excitement that comes from greed. She didn't greet me. She just stepped back and waved her hand, a gesture of dismissal, before I had even entered. "You are late, Wallace," she said, taking a sip of her wine. "Pendergast charges by the hour. You are wasting our inheritance." I stepped inside. The air in the hallway was thick, but it didn't smell like Jennifer anymore. The scent of her lavender potpourri was gone, replaced by the sharp chemical tang of expensive perfume and stale champagne. The house was a wreck. It had only been 24 hours since they kicked me out, but the looting had already begun. The antique hallway runner was rolled up and leaned against the wall. There were price tags on the lamps. In the living room, boxes were stacked high, labeled donation and trash. I saw Jennifer's collection of porcelain figurines, pieces she had loved since she was a girl, dumped haphazardly into a cardboard box marked for goodwill. My heart hammered against my ribs, a slow, heavy rhythm of rage. I forced my hands to tremble as I took off my hat. "I came as soon as I could," I said, keeping my voice thin and raspy. The traffic was bad. I walked into the dining room. Mr. Pendergast was there, sitting at the head of the table like a king holding court. He had a sheen of sweat on his forehead and a plate of half-eaten hors d'oeuvres in front of him. Brittany was pacing by the sideboard, scrolling on her phone. When she saw me, she stopped. Her eyes narrowed. "Sit down, Wallace. Let's get this over with. We have a buyer coming for the piano in an hour." I looked at the baby grand piano in the corner. Jennifer used to play it on Sunday mornings. It was out of tune, and the wood was warped from humidity, but to me, it was priceless. To Brittany, it was just lumber. I pulled out a chair and sat. The wood creaked. Pendergast slid a thick document across the polished mahogany table. "Mr. King," he began, his voice oily and condescending, "we have drawn up a final settlement agreement. My clients are willing to be generous. We are offering you a clean break." I looked at the document. The title was bold and aggressive: Voluntary Relinquishment of Assets and Liability Waiver. "What does this mean?" I asked, squinting at the text as if the words were blurring. "It means you sign over everything," Brittany snapped. "You sign over your claim to the house. You sign over any rights to Mom's business. You agree that you have no stake in the estate. In exchange, we agree not to sue you." "Sue me?" I asked, letting my mouth hang open slightly. "For what? For misappropriation of funds," Pendergast said, tapping the table with a manicured finger. "We have reason to believe you were siphoning money from Jennifer's decor for your own personal use. We have seen the transfers, thousands of dollars moving out of the business accounts." I almost laughed. Those transfers were reimbursements for the personal loans I had floated the company. They were seeing money leaving and assuming theft, not realizing it was a fraction of the capital I had put in. They were looking at a sinking ship and blaming the man bailing out the water. And Courtney added, "Walking into the room, we won't press charges for elder abuse." I froze. I looked at her. She was leaning against the doorframe, smirking. And then I saw it. Around her neck, resting against her black silk blouse, was a string of pearls. They were South Sea pearls, creamy and lustrous with a diamond clasp. I had bought them for Jennifer on our first anniversary. I had flown to Kyoto to hand-pick them. Jennifer had worn them only on special occasions, treating them like holy relics. She had asked to be buried in them. But when the mortician asked for the jewelry, the box was empty. Courtney saw me staring. She reached up and twirled the strand around her finger. "Do you like them?" she asked, her voice dripping with malice. "Mom never wore them right. She was too old. Pearls need youth to really shine. They look better on me than they ever did on her. Or you." The disrespect was physical. It felt like a slap. She was wearing her mother's favorite possession while accusing me of abusing the woman I worshipped. My vision tunneled. For a second, I wanted to stand up. I wanted to tell them exactly who I was. I wanted to tell them that the necklace she was toying with was worth more than the equity in the house she was trying to steal. I wanted to scream. But I didn't. I swallowed the rage. I pushed it down into the cold, calculating part of my brain where the liquidator lived. "You are right," I whispered, looking down at my hands. "They look very expensive." "They are," Brittany said. "And they are ours, just like everything else. Now sign the paper, Wallace. Or do we call the police and show them the bruising on Mom's arms?" The bruising was from the IV lines, from the life support that I had fought to keep running. They were going to use her medical trauma to frame me. I reached for the pen Pendergast held out. My hand shook violently. I made sure they saw it. I made sure they saw a terrified old man who was cornered. "If I sign this," I stammered, my voice breaking, "do you promise? Do you promise you will leave me alone? Do you promise you won't come after me for the money?" "I don't have any money. I live in a motel." Brittany laughed. It was a cruel barking sound. "We don't want your pennies, Wallace. We want the empire. We want you gone. Sign it, and we will never speak to you again. We will pretend you never existed." I looked at the document. I flipped to the signature page. I need to read it first," I said. Pendergast sighed, checking his watch. "Make it fast. I bill in 15-minute increments." I pretended to read. In reality, I was scanning for one specific clause. I needed the language to be absolute. I needed them to accept full, immediate, and irrevocable ownership. I found it on page 4. The beneficiaries accept all assets, tangible and intangible, associated with the estate and the business entity, known as Jennifer's Decor, LLC. It was good, but it wasn't enough. It left wiggle room. If the business collapsed, they could argue they hadn't formally taken control of the operations yet. They could argue I was still the director of record. "I need to add something," I said, looking up. Brittany groaned. "Oh my God, Wallace, just sign it. I want to be sure," I said, my voice trembling. "I want to be sure I am not responsible anymore. I don't want to get a call about a broken window or a tax bill. I want to be completely out." "Can I write that in?" Pendergast rolled his eyes. He grabbed the document and scribbled a line at the bottom. "Wallace King is hereby released from all operational duties and liabilities." I shook my head. "No," I said. "That's not enough. I want you to write that you accept the structures, the way the business runs. I don't want you coming back to me saying I ran it wrong. I want you to accept it exactly as it is today." Pendergast looked at me like I was an idiot. He thought I was covering my tracks for incompetence. He thought I was afraid of being sued for bad management. "Fine," he spat. He wrote a new sentence in the margin. "The beneficiaries agree to accept immediate transfer of all operational structures, accounts, and existing financial frameworks. Effective upon signature holding. Wallace King harmless for future solvency." He pushed the paper back to me. "Is that better? Does that make you feel safe, old man?" I looked at the words. Existing financial frameworks. That was the key. That phrase locked them into the debt covenants. It meant they were accepting the loans, the lines of credit, and the personal guarantees attached to the business structure. They were accepting the bomb, and they were agreeing to hold the detonator. "Yes," I said softly. "That makes me feel safe." I picked up the pen. I hesitated one last time. I looked at Courtney playing with the pearls. I looked at Brittany tapping her foot impatiently. I looked at the empty space where Jennifer's photo used to hang. "You are sure?" I asked. "You want all of it. We want all of it," Brittany hissed. "Every brick, every dollar, every contract." I put the pen to the paper. I signed my name. It was a shaky, jagged signature, not the crisp, authoritative autograph I used on Wall Street. It was the signature of a victim. I pushed the paper across the table. Pendergast snatched it up. He stamped it with his notary seal. Thump, thump. Done, he said, grinning. Brittany grabbed the document and held it to her chest like a prize. Finally, she said. Courtney raised her glass. To us, she said. To the future. I stood up slowly. I buttoned my jacket. Can I take one thing, I asked? Brittany glared at me. What, the photo album, I said. The one from the funeral. You put it in the trash bag, but it got wet. I just want the picture of your mother from our wedding day. Courtney laughed. Oh, Wallace. That went in the dumpster yesterday. We are cleaning house. We don't want reminders of Mom's mistakes. The dumpster. I looked at them. I etched this moment into my memory. The cruelty, the arrogance, the absolute lack of humanity. Okay, I said. I turned and walked toward the door. Hey, Wallace, Brittany called out. I stopped my hand on the doorknob. Don't forget to cancel your newspaper subscription, she mocked. We don't want your bills coming here. I didn't turn around. Don't worry, I said quietly. You won't be receiving any of my bills, but you will be receiving yours. I walked out into the night. The door slammed shut behind me, followed by the sound of the deadbolt sliding home. They locked me out. They locked themselves in. I walked to my truck. I did not drive to the dumpster to look for the photo. I knew it was gone. Jennifer was gone. The house was gone. But as I drove away, heading toward the Four Seasons Hotel where Leonard was waiting with the real paperwork, I felt a strange lightness in my chest. They had signed the paper. They had accepted the financial frameworks. Pendergast hadn't read the fine print of the original loan documents. If he had, he would know that the framework included a clause that triggered immediate repayment of all principal debt upon the transfer of ownership, unless the original guarantor me agreed to extend it. And I wasn't going to extend it. I pulled out my phone and dialed Leonard. They signed, he asked. They signed, I said. And they added the addendum. Pendergast notarized it. Good, Leonard said. I'll have the foreclosure notices drafted by morning. How did it go? They were wearing her pearls, Leonard. I said, my voice flat. There was a silence on the line. Leonard knew about the pearls. Then tomorrow, he said, his voice dropping an octave, we take the skin off. I hung up. I drove through the dark streets of Seattle. The rain started to fall again, washing the dust off my truck. I wasn't Wallace the gardener anymore. I wasn't Wallace the grieving husband. I was the liquidator. And the liquidation had just begun. The ink in the pen felt heavy like lead. I let my hand tremble, a tremor I had perfected in front of mirrors during my years dismantling hostility. To Brittany and Courtney, it was the shake of a defeated old man terrified of the future. To me, it was the steady hand of a surgeon preparing to make the final incision. The document lay on the table, a white expanse of surrender. Wait, I whispered, pulling the paper back, just as Pendergast reached for it. Brittany let out a groan that was half sigh, half growl. She checked her phone again. She was probably texting her friends, boasting that the deed was done, that the squatter was gone. What is it now, Wallace? She snapped. Do you need reading glasses? Just sign the line. I looked at Pendergast. I needed him to be the one to seal their fate. I needed his arrogance to be the nail in the coffin. I am worried about the bills, I said, my voice wavering. Not just the house, the other things. Jennifer always had subscriptions, magazines, wine clubs, the gardening service. I don't want them calling me. I don't want debt collectors chasing me to the motel. Pendergast chuckled. It was a wet, dismissive sound. He leaned back in his chair, loosening his tie. He thought he was dealing with a senile retiree worried about a $50 landscaping invoice. He did not know he was sitting across from a man who had once restructured a billion-dollar airline debt. Mr. King, Pendergast said, speaking slowly as if to a child. The agreement covers everything, assets and liabilities. That means they get the house and they pay the electric bill. They get the business and they pay the cleaning crew. You are free. You are clear. I shook my head stubbornly. It does not say that explicitly, I insisted. It says I relinquish rights. It does not say they accept the obligations immediately. What if there is a delay? What if the transfer takes weeks? I can't afford 2 weeks of bills. I am on a fixed income. Courtney slammed her wineglass down. Oh my God, he is worried about the cable bill. Wallace, we will pay the damn cable. Just sign. I looked at Pendergast with pleading eyes. Please, I said. Just add one line, a small appendix, just so I can sleep tonight. Pendergast looked at Brittany. She nodded aggressively. Get him out of here. Fine. Pendergast sighed. He pulled a yellow legal pad from his briefcase. Dictate. What do you want it to say, Mr. King? Keep it simple. I took a deep breath. I had rehearsed this sentence in my head 1,000 times. It had to be precise. It had to be legally binding. And it had to sound innocent enough to slip past a lazy lawyer who was thinking about his dinner reservation. Write this, I said. The receiving party. Brittany and Courtney Davis agrees to accept total possession of all existing assets and all accompanying obligations, immediately granting Wallace King full exemption from any financial or operational responsibility from this moment forward. Pendergast scribbled it down. He read it back, frowning slightly at the word obligations. Accompanying obligations, he muttered. That is broad, Wallace. That could mean anything. I shrugged, looking small in my oversized chair. I just mean the bills, I said. The water, the heat, the inventory orders Jennifer placed last week. I don't know how much they are. I just don't want to be liable if a check bounces. Pendergast laughed. He looked at Brittany. He is worried about inventory checks. Ms. Davis, are you willing to accept responsibility for the current utility bills and pending orders? Brittany waved her hand dismissively. Yes, yes. Mom's business makes millions. We can handle a few invoices. Add the line. Let's go. Pendergast typed the sentence into his laptop, printed a fresh page, and stapled it to the back of the agreement. He didn't check the corporate credit lines. He didn't pull the lien report. He didn't ask what accompanying obligations might be attached to the existing assets. He assumed assets meant money. He didn't realize that in the corporate world, an asset can be underwater. He didn't realize that a business is not just a store full of furniture. It is a legal entity that can owe more than it owns. He slid the new document toward me. Here, he said. Paragraph C, subsection 4. Beneficiaries accept all assets and accompanying obligations immediately. Happy now, I read the line. It was perfect. By accepting the obligations immediately, they were bypassing the standard grace period for loan restructuring. They were stepping into my shoes as the guarantor. And since I was simultaneously withdrawing my personal backing, they were stepping into shoes that were about to be filled with concrete and thrown into the ocean. Yes, I said softly. I am happy. I picked up the pen. I signed my name. Wallace King. Pendergast notarized it instantly. He stamped the seal with a heavy thud that sounded like a gavel, sentencing them to poverty. Congratulations, ladies, Pendergast said, handing them the folder. You are now the sole owners of Jennifer's Decor and the King estate. Brittany grabbed the folder. She looked at me with a sneer that twisted her beautiful face into something ugly. Finally, she said, Get out. I stood up. My knees popped. I buttoned my cheap jacket. I looked at the room one last time. I looked at the pearls around Courtney's neck. I looked at the champagne glasses. "You have the keys," Brittany demanded. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the key ring, the house key, the office key, the warehouse key. I placed them gently on the table. "They are all yours," I said. I walked to the door. No one walked me out. I heard the cork of another champagne bottle pop as I stepped onto the porch. I walked to my truck in the dark. The rain had started again, a light Seattle drizzle that chilled the bone. But I didn't feel the cold. I felt a fire in my belly. I sat in the driver's seat and looked back at the house. They were celebrating inside. They were toasting their victory. They thought they had just inherited a fortune. They didn't know that Pendergast had just signed their death warrant. By accepting all accompanying obligations, they hadn't just agreed to pay the electric bill. They had legally assumed responsibility for the $4.2 million in secured commercial debt that I had personally guaranteed. And the moment I drove away, I was going to make the call that would call that debt due. Pendergast's mistake was fatal. He saw a confused old man. He didn't see the liquidator. He didn't check the liabilities. He let his clients sign a blank check to the Bank of Karma. I put the truck in gear. I drove down the long driveway, leaving the lights and the laughter behind. I was going back to the Four Seasons. I had a meeting with Leonard in the morning. And when the sun rose, the eviction notice wouldn't be on my door. It would be on theirs. The morning sun reflected off the gleaming glass tower where Pendergast had his office. I had slept well at the Four Seasons, a stark contrast to the previous nights at the Starlight Motel. I was wearing my best suit, not the rumpled one I had worn to the house the night before, but a charcoal gray Tom Ford that fit perfectly. I had shaved and my shoes were polished to a mirror shine. I looked like Wallace King, the liquidator, not Wallace, the gardener. Leonard met me in the lobby. He was carrying a briefcase that looked heavy enough to contain gold bars. "Ready?" he asked, his eyes twinkling with anticipation. "Ready," I said. We took the elevator to the penthouse floor. Pendergast's receptionist looked at us with confusion. We didn't have an appointment, but Leonard flashed a card that made her pick up the phone immediately. When we walked into the conference room, the party was already underway. Brittany and Courtney were there, surrounded by shopping bags from high-end boutiques. They were drinking mimosas, laughing loudly. Pendergast was sitting at the head of the table, looking smug. When they saw me, the laughter died instantly. "What are you doing here?" Brittany demanded, standing up. "We told you to get lost. You signed the papers. You have no business here." Pendergast stood up, adjusting his tie. "Mr. King, this is highly irregular. If you are here to beg for more time to move your things, the answer is no." Leonard stepped forward. He didn't introduce himself. He just placed his briefcase on the table with a heavy thud. "We are not here to beg, Mr. Pendergast," Leonard said, his voice smooth and dangerous. "We are here to clarify the terms of the transfer." "Transfer?" Pendergast scoffed. "The transfer is done. My clients own everything." Leonard opened the briefcase. He pulled out a single document. It was the agreement I had signed the night before with the handwritten addendum Pendergast had so carelessly notarized. "Yes, they do," Leonard said. "And because they insisted on the immediate transfer of all operational structures as per Mr. King's handwritten addendum, which you countersigned, we are here to formally hand over the liabilities." "Liabilities?" Courtney asked, her mimosa glass pausing halfway to her lips. Leonard pulled out another document. This one was thicker. It was bound in a blue folder with the logo of a major commercial bank. "Mr. Pendergast," Leonard said, sliding the folder across the table. "I believe you failed to conduct a lean search on Jennifer's Decor LLC before advising your clients to accept full ownership." Pendergast picked up the folder. His hands started to shake as he read the title page. "This This says there is a commercial loan, he stammered. Not a loan, Leonard corrected. Loans, plural. $4.2 million in secured commercial debt, to be exact, plus $200,000 in revolving credit lines. $4 million, Brittany shrieked. You are lying. Mom was rich. The business makes millions. Your mother's business had revenue, Leonard said calmly. But it had no profit. For the last 3 years, the only reason the doors stayed open was because Mr. King personally guaranteed the debt. He used his own assets to secure the loans that paid for your inventory, your marketing, and yes, your salaries. He pointed to the addendum on the agreement. When you signed this document last night, you agreed to accept all accompanying obligations immediately. By doing so, you triggered the change of control clause in the loan agreements. Leonard pulled out a third document. This one was a letter from the bank, time-stamped 10:15 a.m. that morning. Since Mr. King has withdrawn his personal guarantee as of this morning, and since the new owners have accepted full responsibility, the bank has exercised its right to accelerate the debt. Accelerate, Courtney whispered. It means the full amount is due, Leonard said, his voice dropping to a whisper that was louder than a scream. Now, you have 48 hours to wire $4.2 million to the bank. If you fail to do so, they will seize the business assets, the inventory, and the real estate collateral. Real estate collateral? Brittany asked, her voice trembling. The house, I said, speaking for the first time. The house is the primary collateral for the business loans. Pendergast dropped the folder. His face was the color of old parchment. He looked at me. He looked at the addendum. He realized finally what he had done. He had let his clients sign a death warrant because he was too lazy to read the fine print. You tricked us, Pendergast whispered. I did not, I replied, my voice cold. I tried to warn you. I told you I was worried about the obligations. I asked you to put it in writing. You laughed at me. You told me it just meant the electric bill. Brittany lunged across the table. You old bastard, she screamed. You can't do this. That house is ours. It is yours, I said. And so is the mortgage that is currently in default. Leonard pulled out one final document. And since you threatened to go to the police with false accusations of elder abuse against Mr. King, we are also serving you with a lawsuit for defamation, conspiracy to commit extortion, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. We are seeking damages in the amount of $5 million. Courtney dropped her glass. It shattered on the floor, splashing mimosa and orange juice onto her expensive shoes. We don't have $5 million, she sobbed. Then I suggest you start selling your purses, I said. I stood up. I looked at Pendergast. I will be reporting you to the Bar Association for gross negligence, I told him. You should have checked the books. I looked at Brittany and Courtney. They were pale, shaking, their arrogance completely evaporated. They looked like what they were, two children who had played with matches and burned down their own house. Enjoy the legacy, I said. I turned and walked out of the office, Leonard right behind me. We didn't look back. We didn't have to. The sound of their screaming was music enough. As we walked down the hall to the elevator, Leonard chuckled. That was brutal, Wallace. Even for you. They wanted everything I said, pressing the elevator button. I just gave them what they asked for. The elevator doors opened. We stepped inside. As the doors closed, shutting out the sound of their panic, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt since Jennifer died. The storm had broken, and I was dry. The elevator ride down from the penthouse of the Pendergast law firm took exactly 45 seconds. In that short span of time, I destroyed the financial future of my stepdaughters. I did not use a gun. I did not use a bomb. I used a banking app on my smartphone. I stood in the corner of the elevator car, the stainless steel reflecting my tailored suit. I pulled my phone from my pocket. The screen brightness was low, but the red button on the interface seemed to pulse. It was the master control for the commercial lending portal of First Sovereign Bank. I had set up the account years ago with a specific failsafe. It was a digital kill switch designed for corporate restructuring, but today it was a weapon of war. I navigated to the section labeled Guarantor Protocols. Under the file for Jennifer's Decor LLC, my name was listed as the primary surety. Next to it was a status bar that read Active. I tapped the menu. I selected the option for immediate withdrawal of support. A warning box popped up. Warning: withdrawing personal guarantee will trigger immediate acceleration of all outstanding principal. Default interest rates of 18% will apply. Are you sure I didn't hesitate? I thought about the garbage bag in the mud. I thought about the pearl necklace around Courtney's neck. I thought about the eviction notice they had taped to my door. I pressed confirm. Authentication required. I held the phone to my face. The biometric scanner read my retina. Processing. Success. Personal guarantee withdrawn. Notice of default sent. The doors opened into the lobby. I walked out into the gray Seattle afternoon. I took a deep breath of the damp air. It tasted clean. It tasted like justice. 500 feet above me in the glass-walled conference room I had just vacated, the first domino was already tipping over. I imagined the scene with the precision of a man who had orchestrated hundreds of bankruptcies. Brittany was probably still screaming at Pendergast, her face flushed with rage. Courtney was likely trying to clean the mimosa off her shoes. They were focused on the lawsuit threat. They were focused on the $5 million I was demanding for defamation. They didn't know the real threat was vibrating in Brittany's Gucci handbag. Her phone buzzed. She ignored it. It buzzed again. A persistent long vibration that meant a priority notification. She would pull it out, annoyed. She would see the logo of her personal bank. Maybe she thought it was a deposit notification. Maybe she thought her trust fund dividend had cleared early. She unlocked the screen. Alert. Account frozen. I walked to my truck, moving with a leisurely pace. I knew exactly what was happening. When Pendergast filed the transfer of ownership papers that morning, he linked Brittany's social security number to the business tax ID. It was standard procedure, but because I had just pulled my backing, the bank's algorithm immediately scanned for new assets to secure the $4 million hole I had left behind. It found Brittany's personal savings. It found her investment portfolio. It found the checking account she used to pay for her yoga classes and her lattes. And it locked them all. Up in the tower, Brittany was staring at her phone. She tapped the screen frantically. Access denied. Contact Risk Management Department immediately. I imagined her voice shrill and panicked. What is going on? Why isn't my Face ID working? She would call the number. She would get a risk officer named Mr. Sterling. Sterling was a cold man. I knew him. We played golf, Mrs. Davis Sterling would say. We have received notice of a default on the commercial loans for Jennifer's Decor. As the new owner of record and pursuant to the right of offset clause in your account agreement, we have placed a temporary hold on your personal assets to cover the interest payment that was due at noon today. But that is my money, Brittany would scream. That has nothing to do with the business. It has everything to do with the business, Ms. Davis. You signed a universal liability waiver. Your assets are now the bank's assets until the debt is satisfied. I unlocked my truck and climbed in. I didn't start the engine yet. I wanted to check the second phase of the demolition. I checked my email. Sarah, the accountant, had followed my instructions perfectly. She had stopped the automatic vendor payments at 9 a.m. The timing was impeccable. The Italian leather supplier, a man named Marco, who ran a tannery in Florence, had a standing order to ship $50,000 worth of high-grade hides every Tuesday. But Marco was old school. He didn't ship until the wire hit his bank. The wire hadn't hit. Courtney's phone was the next to ring. It wasn't a bank. It was the showroom manager, a nervous woman named Linda, who was terrified of Brittany. I could picture Courtney answering, annoyed that her victory party was being interrupted again. "What is it, Linda? We are in a meeting." Ms. Davis. Linda would be stammering. "The trucking company is here, with the inventory for the fall collection, the sofas, the dining sets, the lamps. So, let them in. They won't unload, Ms. Davis. The driver says the shipping invoice was flagged. The logistics company canceled our credit line this morning. They are demanding payment." "Payment? Just tell them to bill us. We have 30-day terms." "No, ma'am. The driver says the terms were revoked an hour ago. He says he needs a cashier's check for $200,000 right now, or he is turning the trucks around and taking the inventory back to the depot. And he says there is a restocking fee of 20%. $200,000. Courtney would look at Brittany. Brittany would look at Pendergast. Pendergast would look at the floor. They didn't have $200,000. Brittany's accounts were frozen. The business account had been drained by the automatic payroll deduction that went out at midnight. Another little detail I had neglected to mention. The business was cash poor. It had always been cash poor. I was the liquidity. "Tell him to wait." Courtney would shout. "Tell him my mother owned this company." The driver didn't care about her mother. The driver cared about his manifest. He would wait 10 minutes, then he would close the bay doors and drive away, taking the entire fall revenue stream with him. I started the truck. The engine rumbled a comforting sound. I put it in gear and pulled out of the parking garage. I merged into the downtown traffic heading toward the highway. I had one more stop to make before I returned to my hotel sanctuary. I drove to the mansion. I didn't go in. I couldn't. The locks were changed, remember? But I didn't need to go in. I parked on the street just outside the wrought iron gates. The house looked imposing in the gray light. It looked solid. It wasn't. I pulled a thick envelope from my passenger seat. It wasn't a letter I had written. It was an automated notice from the private equity firm that held the mortgage note. I had structured the mortgage on the house as a commercial balloon note. It was a common instrument in my line of work. It offered low-interest payments for a set term with the full balance due at maturity. But there was a covenant, a trigger clause. The borrower must maintain a debt service coverage ratio of 1.5. Basically, it meant the borrower had to have enough cash flow to pay the mortgage 1.5 times over. For 3 years, my income had satisfied that ratio. But as of this morning, I was no longer the borrower. Brittany and Courtney were, and their income was 0. Their debt service coverage ratio wasn't 1.5. It was negative. The computer at the equity firm had run its daily audit at noon. It saw the change in guarantor. It saw the lack of income verification for the new owners. It saw the frozen assets at the bank. And it spat out a notice of acceleration and intent to foreclose. I walked up to the gate. I couldn't get to the front door, so I taped the envelope to the black iron bars of the gate right under the keypad where they would enter their code. The notice was bright orange. You couldn't miss it. It stated in bold letters, "Notice of default. Immediate payment of $1.8 million due. Property seizure imminent." I stepped back and admired the placement. It was the first thing they would see when they came home from their disastrous meeting. They would pull up in their luxury cars, exhausted, terrified, their bank accounts frozen, their inventory gone. They would be looking for sanctuary. They would be looking for the one thing they thought they had secured. The house. Mom's house. And they would find a neon orange sticker telling them that the house was no longer a home. It was a liability. I walked back to my truck. My phone rang. It wasn't Brittany. It wasn't Courtney. It was Pendergast. I let it ring. I watched the name flash on the screen. He was calling to beg. He was calling to threaten. He was calling to ask if we could make a deal. There were no deals. The contract was signed. The ink was dry. The addendum was notarized. I let the call go to voicemail. I drove away. I turned on the radio. Classical music filled the cab of the truck. Mozart's Requiem. Fitting. As I drove back toward the city, I thought about the sheer speed of modern finance. It used to take weeks to ruin a man. Now with algorithms and automated covenants, you could dismantle a life in the time it took to eat a sandwich. Brittany and Courtney had spent 3 days planning my demise. They had spent hours crafting their insults. They had reveled in their cruelty. I had destroyed them in 3 hours without raising my voice. The phone rang again. This time it was Brittany. I answered. I put it on speakerphone so I could hear the desperation clearly over the sound of the rain. "Wallace," she screamed. Her voice was unrecognizable. It was raw, hysterical. "Wallace, what did you do, the bank?" "My cards, they aren't working. I am at the gas station, and I can't even buy water." "Hello, Brittany," I said calmly. "I am afraid I can't help you. I am just a squatter living in a motel. I don't have any money." "Remember you did this, you froze my accounts." "I did nothing of the sort," I said. "I simply removed my protection." "You wanted to be the owner. You wanted the crown." "Well, heavy is the head, Brittany. The bank is just protecting its investment. Since you are the new owner, and since the business has no liquidity, the bank has exercised its right to secure your personal assets. It is standard procedure for high-risk borrowers." "High risk? I am not high risk. I am a Davis. You are unemployed." "Brittany, you have a mortgage you can't pay. You have a business with $4 million in debt and no inventory. To the bank, you aren't a Davis. You are a liability." "Fix it!" she shrieked. "Fix it right now, or I swear to God." "You swear what?" I interrupted, my voice turning cold. "You will go to the police. Go ahead. Tell them you stole $50,000 from a dying woman. Tell them you forged a power of attorney. I have the bank records, Brittany. I have the timestamps. I have the security footage from the house showing you looting the place before probate was even opened." Silence. Heavy breathing silence. You have footage," she whispered. "I installed the cameras, Brittany. I paid for the cloud storage. I have everything. Every conversation, every threat, every stolen vase." "Wallace, please," she sobbed. "I am scared. They took all my money." I hung up. I didn't feel pity. I felt a grim satisfaction. She was scared. Good. Jennifer was scared when she was dying, worried about what would happen to her girls. She asked me to take care of them, and I was. I was teaching them the most valuable lesson of their lives. I pulled into the valet stand at the Four Seasons. The attendant opened my door. "Welcome back, Mr. King." I handed him the keys to the Ford. "Keep it close," I said. "I might need to go to a foreclosure auction soon." I walked into the lobby, the gold and marble shining under the chandeliers. I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. I had my dignity. I had my honor. And somewhere in the dark, cold mansion on the hill, my stepdaughters were learning that when you strip a man of everything, you leave him with nothing to lose. And a man with nothing to lose is the most dangerous creature on earth. The orange sticker on the wrought iron gate was glowing under the security lights like a radioactive warning sign. Brittany clawed at the adhesive, her manicured nails chipping against the cold metal, but the notice of default refused to peel away cleanly. It tore in jagged strips, leaving the bold words "property seizure" still visible for the entire neighborhood to see. Courtney stood behind her, illuminated by the headlights of her Porsche, reading the paper over her sister's shoulder. Her face was a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. $4 million, Courtney whispered, the words choking her. "The notice says the principal balance is $4.2 million. Brittany, you said the house was paid off. You said Mom owned it free and clear. You said Wallace was just a squatter living off her dime. Brittany spun around, her eyes wild. The composure she had maintained during the meeting with Pendergast, the arrogance she had worn like armor at the funeral, was gone. She looked like a trapped animal. "Shut up," Brittany hissed. "It is a mistake. It has to be a mistake." Mom was the face of the company. She was on the cover of Design Weekly. You do not get foreclosed on if you are famous. Wallace did this. He hacked the bank. He messed with the accounts. He did not hack the bank, you idiot. Courtney screamed, her voice cracking and echoing down the quiet, wealthy street. He was the bank. Did you not listen to the lawyer? He was the guarantor. He was paying the mortgage. He was paying the vendors. He was the money, Brittany. We just kicked out the money. Courtney lunged at her sister. It was a clumsy, desperate shove born of panic and the sudden realization that her trust fund lifestyle had just evaporated. Brittany stumbled back against the gate, the iron bars rattling. You told me he was a leech, Courtney shrieked, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. You told me if we got rid of him, we would split the profits. What profits? We are $4 million in the hole. My cards are frozen. My rent is due. I have nothing. Brittany shoved her back. Stop it. We have to think. We have to fix this. We just need to talk to him. Talk to him, Courtney laughed hysterically. We just evicted him. We threw his clothes in the mud. We laughed at him. We threatened to frame him for abuse. Do you think he is going to want to chat? He is an old man, Brittany insisted, though her voice wavered. He is weak. He loved Mom. He is probably crying in that motel right now, missing us. He wants to be a father figure. We just need to go there. Cry a little. Tell him we were stressed. Tell him we made a mistake. We play the grieving daughters. He will fold. He always folds. It was a desperate, delusional plan born from a lifetime of getting their way. They truly believed that tears were a currency that never devalued. They believed that Wallace, the quiet man who fixed the dripping faucets and drove an old truck, was incapable of holding a grudge. They did not know they were dealing with a man who had stared down union bosses and hostile boards without blinking. Get in the car, Brittany ordered. We are going to the Starlight Motel. We are going to bring him home. They scrambled into the Porsche. Brittany drove like a maniac, blowing through stop signs, her hands gripping the leather steering wheel so hard her knuckles were white. The rain lashed against the windshield, blurring the city lights into streaks of red and gold. Inside the car, the silence was heavy, filled only with the sound of their ragged breathing. They pulled into the parking lot of the Starlight Motel 20 minutes later. It was a stark contrast to their world. The neon sign flickered, buzzing with a dying electrical hum. Trash swirled in the corners of the lot. That is his truck, Courtney said, pointing to the 2010 Ford pickup parked in a dark corner. He is here. They parked the Porsche next to the rusted truck, the luxury car looking absurdly out of place. They ran through the rain to room 112. Brittany pounded on the door. Wallace, open up. It is Brittany. We need to talk. There was no answer. She pounded again, harder this time. Wallace, please, we are sorry. We didn't mean it. Just open the door. The door to the adjacent room opened. A maid, a tired woman with a cart full of towels, stepped out. She looked at the two women in their designer clothes, soaking wet, and screaming at a cheap motel door. He is not in there, the maid said, lighting a cigarette. Brittany spun around. Where is he? We see his truck. He left the truck, the maid said, exhaling a plume of smoke. Said he didn't need it anymore. Said it didn't fit his style. What do you mean? Courtney asked, stepping forward. Where did he go? A car came for him about an hour ago, the maid said, leaning against her cart. A big black car. A Bentley, I think. Driver in a uniform and everything. Carried his bag like it was full of diamonds. A Bentley, Brittany whispered. Yeah. The driver called him Mr. King. Asked if he wanted to go straight to the Four Seasons. The old guy just smiled and said, Yes. Take me home. The Four Seasons. Brittany and Courtney looked at each other. The Four Seasons was the most expensive hotel in the city. The presidential suite cost more for one night than Wallace's truck was worth. He has money, Courtney stammered. He has real money. He played us, Brittany hissed, her eyes narrowing. He pretended to be poor so we would underestimate him. He set us up. We have to go there, Courtney said. If he is at the Four Seasons, he has the cash to fix this. We have to beg. We have to get on our knees if we have to. They ran back to the car. The drive to downtown Seattle was a blur of panic. The reality of their situation was sinking in deeper with every mile. The frozen accounts, the foreclosure notice, the debt. They were not just broke, they were ruined. Wallace was not just their stepfather anymore. He was their only lifeline. They pulled up to the valet stand of the Four Seasons. The hotel was a fortress of glass and light, a beacon of wealth. The valet looked at their wet clothes and the mud on their shoes with a polite disdain as he opened the car door. We are here to see Wallace King, Brittany demanded, marching into the lobby. The lobby smelled of expensive lilies and old money. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that costs thousands of dollars. Brittany rushed to the front desk. What room is Wallace King in? She asked the concierge. I am afraid I cannot disclose guest information, the concierge replied smoothly. He is our father, Courtney shouted, causing a couple in the lobby to turn and stare. It is an emergency. At that moment, the elevator doors chimed. They turned. Walking out of the elevator was a man they barely recognized. It was Wallace, but it wasn't the Wallace they knew. The stooped posture was gone. He stood tall, his shoulders squared. The flannel shirt and stained khakis were replaced by a charcoal gray suit that fit him like a second skin. The fabric shimmered under the chandelier lights. He wore a watch that caught the light, a Patek Philippe that cost more than a house. He was flanked by two men. One was Leonard Katz holding his briefcase. The other was the hotel manager listening intently to whatever Wallace was saying. Wallace, Brittany screamed. She ran across the lobby, her heels clicking on the marble floor. Courtney followed, looking small and terrified. Wallace stopped. He turned slowly. He looked at them not with anger, but with the detached curiosity of a scientist observing a failed experiment. Hello, Brittany. Courtney. Dad, Brittany gasped, reaching for his arm. You have to help us. The bank, the house, everything is frozen. We didn't know. We are sorry. We were just grieving. Please, you can't let us lose the house. Wallace stepped back, avoiding her touch. He adjusted his cufflink. I am not your father, Brittany. You made that very clear yesterday. You said I was a husband for 3 years. A blip. We didn't mean it, Courtney sobbed. We were angry. We love you, Wallace looked at her. He looked at the pearl necklace she was still wearing. You love the idea of a safety net, he said calmly. You love the money. But the money is gone. Or rather, my money is gone from your accounts. You wanted the assets. You have them. But the debt, Brittany cried. It is $4 million. We can't pay that. Then I suggest you declare bankruptcy, Wallace said. It is a painful process, but you learn a lot from it. I used to guide companies through it. It builds character. He signaled to the doorman. The heavy glass doors swung open. A silver Bentley Mulsanne was waiting at the curb, its engine purring. The driver stepped out and opened the rear door. Where are you going? Brittany asked, her voice rising to a shriek. You can't just leave us here. I'm going to dinner, Wallace said. I have a reservation. And then I am going to look at some real estate. I hear a property I used to live in might be coming onto the market very cheap at a foreclosure auction. He stepped toward the car. Wallace Courtney grabbed his sleeve. Please, we have nothing. You have exactly what you earned, Wallace said gently, removing her hand from his suit. He got into the car. The heavy door closed with a solid thud, sealing him inside a world of silence and luxury. Through the tinted glass, they could see him pick up a newspaper. He didn't look at them. He didn't wave. The car pulled away, merging into the traffic of the rainy city night. Brittany and Courtney stood on the sidewalk, the rain soaking their hair, the cold seeping into their bones. Behind them, the warm golden light of the hotel lobby beckoned, but they knew they weren't welcome there. They were on the outside now. Courtney looked at her sister. Her face was a mask of despair. He is going to buy the house, she whispered. When the bank takes it, he is going to buy it back. Brittany stared at the taillights of the Bentley disappearing into the distance. He planned this, she muttered. He planned the whole thing. No, Courtney said, shivering. We did this. We handed him the gun and asked him to pull the trigger. They stood there for a long time, two queens without a kingdom, realizing for the first time that the man they had called a loser had just won the game before they even knew they were playing. The Bentley was gone. The money was gone. And the only thing they had left was a necklace that didn't belong to them and a debt that would follow them for the rest of their lives. The collapse of the Davis sisters' world did not happen in slow motion. It happened at the speed of a fiber optic cable transmitting a foreclosure order. 48 hours after I walked out of Pendergast's office, the machinery of the banking system, which I had helped design and weaponize over 40 years of corporate warfare, began to grind them into dust. I watched it all from the comfort of my suite at the Four Seasons. I didn't need to be there to see it. The reports came in from Leonard in real time. First, the repossession agents arrived. Brittany was at a coffee shop trying to use a credit card that had already been flagged as delinquent when a tow truck backed up to her Mercedes G-Wagon. She screamed. She threw her latte at the driver. She called the police. But when the officers arrived, they didn't arrest the repo man. They looked at the court order on his clipboard, shrugged, and told her to clear her personal items out of the vehicle. She stood on the sidewalk holding her yoga mat and a bag of gym clothes, watching her status symbol disappear around the corner. Courtney fared no better. The eviction notice for her luxury apartment wasn't just a piece of paper taped to the door. It was a sheriff's deputy standing in her hallway, arms crossed, giving her 20 minutes to pack a bag because the lease guarantor had revoked security and the landlord had exercised an immediate clause for insolvency. She left with 2 suitcases and the pearl necklace she still refused to pawn, crying into her phone to friends who had suddenly stopped answering her calls. But the main event, the final act of this tragedy, was the house, Jennifer's house. Because the commercial loans were cross-collateralized with the residential deed, the default on the business triggered an immediate foreclosure on the estate. Usually this process takes months. But Pendergast, in his incompetence, had allowed them to sign a deed in lieu of foreclosure provision buried in the original loan documents I had structured. It meant that upon default, there was no grace period. There was no mediation. The property went straight to the auction block. The auction was scheduled for a Tuesday morning, 10 days after the funeral. It was held on the wet gray steps of the King County Courthouse. It was a public spectacle, open to vultures, investors, and anyone with a cashier's check and a lack of conscience. I arrived in the Bentley. The rain was falling in sheets, turning the city into a watercolor painting of gloom. I wore a long black trench coat and held a sturdy umbrella. Leonard stood beside me, checking his watch. "They are here," Leonard murmured, tilting his head toward the bottom of the steps. I looked down. Huddled under a cheap, broken umbrella were Brittany and Courtney. They looked like ghosts of the women who had sneered at me in the dining room less than 2 weeks ago. Their hair was frizzy and damp. They wore jeans and sweatshirts, the designer clothes likely sold or ruined. They looked exhausted. their eyes rimmed with dark circles that spoke of sleepless nights in cheap motels or on friends' couches. They were there to watch the end. They were there hoping for a miracle. Maybe they thought a white knight would buy the house and let them stay. Maybe they thought the bank would have mercy. They still didn't understand how the world worked. The auctioneer, a man with a voice like gravel in a blender, stepped up to the podium. A small crowd of investors gathered. I recognized a few of them. Sharks I had swum with in the past. They nodded at me with respect. They knew why I was there. "We are here to auction the property located at 4452 Highland Drive," the auctioneer bellowed over the sound of the rain. "Along with the commercial assets and intellectual property of Jennifer's Decor, LLC. This is a bundled asset sale. Opening bid is set at the value of the outstanding lien, $4.2 million. The crowd murmured. $4 million was a steep opening bid for a house and a failing business. The investors looked at their tablets, calculating margins. They saw the debt. They saw the risk. They stayed silent. Brittany clutched Courtney's hand. I could see her lips moving, praying. "Please, nobody bid. Please let us keep it." She didn't understand. If nobody bid, the bank took it. She lost either way. "Going once at 4.2 million, the auctioneer called out. Silence. The rain drummed against the pavement. "Going twice." I stepped forward. I didn't raise a paddle. I didn't shout. I simply raised my right hand, my leather glove gleaming wetly. "Credit bid," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the noise of the storm like a knife. The auctioneer looked at me. He checked his ledger. He saw my name listed as the primary secured creditor. In a foreclosure auction, the person holding the debt has the right to bid using the money owed to them. I didn't have to pay $4 million. I was using the $4 million they owed me to buy the house. I was paying with their debt. "Mr. Wallace King bids the full credit amount," the auctioneer announced. "Are there any other bids?" The investors looked at me. They knew better than to bid against the liquidator on his own paper. They closed their umbrellas and walked away. "Going once, going twice, sold to Mr. Wallace King for the credit bid. Amount of $4.2 million. The gavel hit the podium with a crack that sounded like a gunshot. Brittany and Courtney froze. They turned slowly, looking up the steps. They saw me standing there, looming over them like a gargoyle. They saw the suit. They saw the Bentley waiting at the curb. They saw the man they had thrown away. For a moment, there was only the sound of the rain. Then the realization hit them. I owned the house. I owned the business. I owned everything. Again. They ran up the steps. Brittany tripped, scraping her knee on the concrete, but she scrambled up, desperate. Courtney followed, sobbing. "Wallace," Brittany screamed, her voice raw. "Wallace, you bought it. You saved it." They stopped a few feet away from me. Leonard stepped in front of me, a physical barrier, but I waved him a sit-in. I wanted them to come close. I wanted to see the hope in their eyes before I extinguished it. "Oh my God!" Courtney wept, clasping her hands together. "We knew you wouldn't let strangers take Mom's house. We knew you still cared. We are so sorry, Wallace. We were crazy. We were grieving. Thank you. Thank you for saving us." Brittany wiped the rain and hair from her face. She tried to smile, but it looked like a grimace of pain. "Dad," she choked out. The word hung in the air, heavy and false. "Dad, we made a mess. We know that. But we can fix it. We can be a family again. We can move back in right. We can run the business together. You can teach us. We will listen this time. I promise." I looked down at them. I looked at the mud on Brittany's knees, mirroring the mud on my shoes at the funeral. I looked at the pearl necklace Courtney was still wearing, the only piece of her mother she hadn't tried to sell. I took a step closer. The air between us was cold. "Dad," I repeated softly. Brittany nodded eagerly, tears mixing with the rain on her cheeks. "Yes, Dad. You married Mom. That makes you our father. Family forgives, right? Family fixes things." I looked her dead in the eyes. My face was a mask of stone. "Do not call me Dad," I said. My voice was low, devoid of any warmth. "I am not your father. I never was. To you, I was just the husband for 3 years. I was the squatter. I was the old man you laughed at while you drank champagne." Brittany's smile faltered. The hope began to drain from her eyes, replaced by a dawning horror. But you bought the house," she stammered. "Why would you buy it if not for us?" "I bought it because it was cheap," I said coldly. "I bought it because I hold the note and I never leave money on the table. It is a distressed asset, Brittany. And I am a liquidator." Courtney let out a wail. "But where are we supposed to go? We have no money. We have no home. Our cards are frozen. We are sleeping in a Motel 6, Wallace." "Then you are living better than I was when you kicked me out," I replied. "I was in the starlight. It has bedbugs." I signaled to Leonard. He handed me a large envelope. I pulled out a set of keys. The keys to the house. The keys they had forced me to leave on the table. I jingled them in my hand. The sound was sharp and metallic. "This house is no longer your mother's home," I said. "It is a property owned by WK Holdings, and as of this moment you are trespassing on my steps." Brittany fell to her knees. It wasn't a theatrical gesture. Her legs just gave out. She grabbed the hem of my trench coat. "Please," she begged, sobbing uncontrollably. "Please, Wallace, we have nothing. Mom would want you to help us. Mom would hate this." "Do not speak about your mother," I snapped, pulling my coat from her grip. "Your mother asked me to take care of you, and I did. I kept you afloat for 3 years while you bled the company dry. I tried to give you the legacy. You threw it back in my face because you wanted the cash." I leaned down, bringing my face close to hers. "You wanted to be independent women. You wanted to own the world. Well, congratulations. You are now independent. You own nothing. You owe $4 million. That debt didn't disappear just because I bought the collateral. The deficiency judgment is coming next. You will be paying me for the rest of your life." Courtney stared at me, her mouth open in shock. You are going to make us pay the rest." "Every cent," I said. "Every latte. Every vacation. Every insult." I straightened up. I looked at the security guards standing by the courthouse doors. I nodded to them. "Remove them," I said. "They are harassing the owner." The guards stepped forward. Brittany screamed as they grabbed her arms. Courtney tried to run, but she slipped on the wet steps and fell hard. They dragged them away, their heels scraping against the concrete, their cries echoing off the stone pillars of the courthouse. "Wallace, you can't do this. We are family." I turned my back on them. I walked down the steps to the waiting Bentley. The driver opened the door for me. The interior was warm and smelled of leather. I sat down and brushed the rain from my coat. Leonard slid in beside me. He looked out the window at the 2 women being escorted off the property, screaming into the rain. "Are we done?" Leonard asked quietly. I looked at the keys in my hand. I thought about the house. It was full of bad memories now. It was tainted. "Not yet," I said. "There is one last thing I need to show them before I close the book." I pulled a small leather-bound book from my inside pocket. It was Jennifer's diary. I had saved it from the nightstand before I left the house the first time. I hadn't shown it to them because I thought it would be too cruel. But cruelty was the only language they understood. "Drive to the motel where they are staying," I told the driver. Leonard raised an eyebrow. You are going to visit them? No, I said. I am just going to drop off a package. They need to know who their mother really was. They need to know that they didn't just kill their relationship with me. They spit on the only person who ever truly protected them. The car pulled away from the curb, gliding silently through the rain. I watched the city pass by, a blur of gray and steel. I felt empty, but it was a clean emptiness. The rot was gone. The parasite had been removed. Now all that was left was to cauterize the wound. The Motel 6 was located off the interstate, a bleak stretch of asphalt illuminated by flickering sodium lights. It was the kind of place where people went when they had run out of options, a halfway house for the desperate and the broken. The Bentley glided into the parking lot like a shark entering a goldfish pond. The contrast was offensive. The silver paint of the car reflected the neon vacancy sign, a beacon of wealth in a sea of poverty. Leonard stayed in the car. He offered to come with me to be the witness, but I shook my head. This wasn't a legal proceeding. This was a family matter. Or rather, the final severance of one. I walked up the concrete stairs to the second floor. The wind whipped rain against my face, but I didn't feel it. I was numb. I found room 204. I could hear the television blaring inside, a mindless drone to drown out the silence of ruin. I knocked. 3 sharp raps. The volume of the television lowered. I heard footsteps. The door opened a crack, the safety chain pulled taut. Brittany peered out. Her eyes were red and swollen, her mascara smeared across her cheeks like war paint. She looked at me, and for a second, a spark of hope ignited in her gaze. She thought I had come to rescue them. She thought I had come to bring them back to the mansion, to tell them it was all a cruel lesson and that the nightmare was over. Wallace, she breathed, fumbling with the chain. She threw the door open. You came. I knew you would come. I stepped into the room. It smelled of stale pizza and cheap air freshener. Courtney was sitting on one of the twin beds, wrapped in a thin, scratchy blanket. She looked up, her face pale. Did you bring money? Courtney asked, her voice cracking. We are hungry, Wallace. The vending machine took my last dollar. I looked at them. 2 women in their 30s, reduced to children waiting for an allowance. I did not bring money, I said, closing the door behind me to shut out the wind. I brought the truth. The hope vanished from Brittany's face, replaced by a sullen anger. If you are just here to gloat, get out. We know you won. You took the house, you took the business. Are you happy now? I walked over to the small round table near the window and placed the leather-bound book on it. It was Jennifer's diary. It was worn at the corners, the leather softened by the oils of her hands. She had written in it every night. Do you know what this is? I asked. Brittany looked at the book. That is Mom's journal. Yes, I said. I saved it from the nightstand before I left the house the first time. I didn't want you to throw it in the dumpster like you did with our wedding photo. Courtney scoffed. We wouldn't have thrown it away. We loved Mom. Did you? I asked softly. Or did you love what she gave you? I opened the book. The pages were filled with Jennifer's looping script. I turned to a bookmark I had placed earlier. It marked a date from 5 years ago. September 14th. Read this, I said, pointing to the entry. Brittany hesitated. She looked at Courtney, then walked to the table. She looked down at the page. Read it out loud, I commanded. Brittany swallowed hard. She began to read, her voice trembling. September 14th. I can't stop shaking. The letter came today from the IRS. They are auditing the last 7 years. I called the accountant and he quit. He said he won't go to jail for me. I don't know what to do. The money is gone. I spent the tax withholdings on Brittany's graduate school tuition and Courtney's trip to Bali. I cooked the books to hide the losses. If they look closely, they will see the fraud. They will see I embezzled from the employee pension fund to pay the mortgage. Brittany stopped. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with shock. What? She whispered. Mom. Mom embezzled. Keep reading, I said. I am going to prison. I know it. I can't tell the girls. It would destroy them. They think I am a success. They think the money is endless. I am a failure. I am a criminal. I stood on the balcony tonight and thought about jumping. I just want it to stop. Courtney let out a sob. She covered her mouth with her hand. Mom wanted to kill herself, she choked out. Read the next entry, I said. Dated 3 weeks later. Brittany turned the page. Her hands were shaking so badly she almost tore the paper. October 5th. I met a man today. His name is Wallace. He came into the store looking for a sofa. We started talking. I don't know why, but I broke down. I told him everything. I told him about the audit. I told him about the pension fund. I expected him to run. Instead, he asked to see the ledgers. Brittany paused. She looked at me. I stood there, stone-faced. October 7th. Wallace came back. He brought a briefcase. He didn't bring flowers. He brought a check. He paid the IRS. He paid the pension fund back. He restructured the debt. He told me he used to fix broken companies for a living. He told me he could fix this, but I had to promise never to touch the accounts again. He saved me. He literally saved my life. I asked him why. He said he was tired of seeing beautiful things destroyed by bad math. He is my angel. If not for him, I would be in handcuffs. If not for him, the girls would know their mother is a fraud. Brittany closed the book. The silence in the room was heavier than the debt I had saddled them with. You paid the IRS, she whispered. I paid the IRS $1.5 million in back taxes and penalties, I said. I replenished the employee pension fund you two drained with your lifestyle. I kept your mother out of federal prison. Courtney stood up. She walked over to the book and touched it as if it were a holy relic. We didn't know, she said. She never told us. Of course she didn't, I snapped. She wanted to protect you. She wanted you to see her as the successful queen, not the desperate criminal. She lived in terror that you would find out she was a fraud. She leveraged her soul to buy your affection. I looked at them, my gaze piercing through their tears. You called me a squatter. You said I was a gold digger who latched onto a rich widow. The truth is, your mother was destitute when I met her. I didn't marry her for her money. I married her to save her from yours. Brittany sank onto the bed. She looked at her hands. All the money. The cars. The tuition. Stolen, I said brutally. It was stolen money, and I paid it back. Every cent you spent for the last 5 years came from my pocket, laundered through the business so you wouldn't feel guilty. I let you despise me. I let you treat me like a servant because I promised her I wouldn't shatter your illusion. But then she died. I continued, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. And instead of mourning her, you attacked me. You attacked the only person who knew the truth and kept the secret. You tried to destroy the architect who was holding up the ceiling. Courtney looked at me, her face wet with tears. We destroyed our own safety net, she realized. You didn't just destroy it, I said. You set it on fire and danced around the flames. You threatened to frame me for abuse me. The man who spent his retirement savings keeping your mother out of a cage. I picked up the diary. I held it out to Brittany. Take it, I said. Keep it. She recoiled. I don't want it. Take it. I shouted, my voice filling the small room. She took the book, clutching it to her chest. Read it every night, I told them. Read it when you are working double shifts to pay off the deficiency judgment. Read it when you are sleeping in a rented room because you lost the mansion. Remember who your mother really was. She wasn't a saint. She was a woman who made mistakes because she couldn't say no to you. And remember who I was. I wasn't the stepdad you were stuck with. I was the only thing standing between you and the street. I walked to the door. I put my hand on the knob. Brittany spoke. Her voice was barely a whisper. Wallace. Dad. Please. We are sorry. We didn't know. Help us. Just one more time. I turned back. I looked at the two women who had thrown my clothes in the mud. You had a savior, I said. Her name was Jennifer, and you bled her dry until she died. Then you had a second savior. His name was Wallace, and you spat in his face. I opened the door. The rain swirled in. You are out of saviors, girls. You are on your own. I stepped out into the night and pulled the door shut. I heard wailing from inside the room, a sound of pure, unadulterated regret. It was the sound of children realizing that the dark is real and the nightlight has burned out. I walked down the stairs to the waiting Bentley. Leonard opened the door for me. Everything okay? He asked. I looked up at the window of room 204. The light was on. I could see their silhouettes. They finally know the truth, I said, sliding into the leather seat. And does the truth set you free? Leonard asked. I thought about the diary. I thought about the secrets I had carried. No, I said. The truth doesn't set you free. The truth just explains why you are in chains, but at least now they know who forged the links. Drive, Leonard. I'm done here. The car pulled away, leaving the motel, and the Davis sisters behind in the rearview mirror, shrinking until they were nothing but a speck of light in the vast, indifferent darkness. The debt was called. The ledger was balanced, and the silence that followed was the most expensive thing they would ever own. The tragedy of Brittany and Courtney wasn't just about losing a fortune. It was about the fatal arrogance of judging worth by appearance. They mistook silence for submission and kindness for weakness, never realizing that the man they despised was the only pillar holding up their sky. Greed acts like a blindfold, making us see people as obstacles rather than benefactors. They were so desperate to claim the empire that they didn't bother to check the foundation. In the end, they learned the hardest truth of life: when you burn a bridge to light your way, you have no right to complain when you are left stranded in the dark. Did you enjoy this story of ultimate financial justice? Let me know in the comments. If you were Wallace, would you have given them one last chance after reading the diary? Or did they deserve to be left in the cold? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more stories where the underdog bites back.